And welcome to another Biddle. We did this earlier, but we're going to do it again on Saturday, December 14th. How's everybody doing?
Pretty
Good.
crisp.
Awesome. Thank you.
Wow.
Muy bien.
So
Very
we
good.
are
Wonderful.
officially open for business. We're good to go. So this week, we are actually joined, and I am so excited to get to talk to both of you guys, Daniel Foray and Cassidy James from the elementary team. Thank you guys for being here.
Yeah, thanks for
How's it
having
going?
us.
It is going wonderful for me because I got to test out elementary on this machine that I'm on another drive, and I also got to test it out on a test machine over here. So I am super excited for this. So let's get right into it. So the first hour is probably going to be us giving our feedback of what we've experienced with elementary, and then the second hour, if you guys are able to stay for that, we would like to get some questions in, and there's a whole list of questions that people from the Telegram group have put out and from the Biddle Europe edition. So here you go.
All
All right, PZ, you installed elementary. What'd you think?
I certainly did. And like everybody else, the first impressions are it looks gorgeous. No matter where you go, no matter what app you open, as long as you stay within the ethos of elementary, everything just looks good, flows good. It's quick. Everything is just really nice and fluid. Now, there's this imaginary thing called workflow, and I don't really get what people say when they mean workflow, but I do, but I don't. It just isn't the right workflow for me. I could perfectly steer somebody to this knowing full well that they would have a really good experience. But I guess because I'm an XFCE guy at heart, I like fiddling. I like messing with things. I like tweaking things to my own standard. And that's not really the way elementary has been put together. You guys have spent an enormous amount of time and effort to get this cohesive feel. So if you're not somebody that can just join a distro and use it, then that's where I am. So I can't use it on a day-to-day basis because I just don't like the way it generically does things. But I could perfectly easily give it to a new user who has no experience with Linux, knowing it's just going to work. So in that regards, it gets a double thumbs up for me. I've had a few teething problems, but thankfully we have the wonderful Shikin who was able to help me out in the Telegram chat, and we got over a few of those things. And there's one particular outstanding issue where for some reason it doesn't like playing with my triple monitors. The display setting itself, I try and change everything to 1440p, and it goes, forget it, I'm not going to change anything. So I have to do everything with NVIDIA. I reboot, and I'm back to two outside monitors being 4K and the middle one being 1440. So I've got a bit of tweaking to do. So I don't know whether, I don't know why it's doing that. But overall, I think it's great. Really do. Really like it.
All right, moving on. Dan, Cassidy, you guys are more than welcome to jump in and respond to anything you like as we move along. So,
right. All right.
Chris, did you get a chance to try Elementary 5.1?
Did I get unmuted? I got unmuted. Okay. Pardon me. I don't know why my voice all of a sudden decided wanted to go froggy on me. But anyhow, yes, I did work with it. Actually, I worked with it more extensively than I have in the past few distros that we've done. So I actually feel proud of myself. I also found how to get a flat pack installed. Flat pack, yeah, it was a flat pack. The radio programming software that I've been trying to get on the past couple distros, finally got it on here by kind of breaking what Daniel and Cassie had set up, far as if they hadn't signed on the package that it wasn't going to be on the system, at least not, they weren't going to offer it in the software center or what have you. But I did find their post on how to set the software options. I can't remember what the exact command was, and that worked. I was able to get what I needed to get put on the computer, and everything was great. I mean, the only other thing I'm trying to remember, I don't think it was this distro, so I'm not even going to mention it. But um, there was a couple other things that I had to go in. I knew how to switch around, so I could get the system to work the way I expected it to work. Um, the I kept thinking of this. What was the Gordon Ramsay cooking show a while back ago, where he would go try to save a restaurant, and he was doing a pizza place in
Kitchen
California.
Nightmares.
It's something, I think it was Kitchen Nightmares, yeah. And he was talking with the owner. The owner, he said, let's say a person wants a margarita pizza without the tomato. And the pizza place owner's like, well, then that's not a margarita pizza. I'm not going to serve it. And he's like, but it is margarita pizza as far as the user is concerned, or the customer is concerned, just without the tomato. And so they're still going to call it a margarita pizza. And the owner couldn't get through his head that it doesn't matter what you think it is. It's what the end consumer thinks it is. And so when you get across someone like myself who knows a bit about how the Linux system works, I mean, I'm still learning. I'm learning things every day, but it's really kind of a disservice restricting a whole bunch of things that which I understand why you do it, and for a general user who is going to look at a desktop and not a computer system, it, it works, and I don't really have a problem with what they do. But far as my workflow is concerned, this isn't something that I could use, and I would not without heavy modification, which kind of defeats the purpose of this. So
Yeah, I
that's
think that
that's about what I have.
Yeah, you and the last person were both talking about, like, it doesn't work for you guys, and I think that's honestly, I think that's fine. At least that's how we see it at elementary. Like, there doesn't have to be a one solution fits all approach. That's part of the beauty of what we do with open source software, is that there is XFCE, and XFCE is awesome, and you can like tweak the crap out of it if that's what you want to do, or there's other desktops that let you do that. And I think that's part of the beauty of what we're doing, is we can take all these cool open source pieces of software and put them together into an experience that we believe is what we feel an experience can be like. But like, that doesn't mean everyone in the world has to use it, and that's kind of, it's okay.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I used to work for a guy who owned a restaurant, and he used to always get so kind of worked up that his menu kept growing. And he was like, like every year there's something new on the menu, and it's making my restaurant more complicated, and I feel like the quality of our food's going down. But he just kept adding more and more, because people were like, well, you don't do this, you don't have a burger, you don't have a whatever. And so he just kept adding to his menu, and he would sit at his desk and kind of, rub his head and go, I'm so jealous of In-N-Out. They have like 4 things on their menu, and they're just lines out the door. And I'm sure that people constantly are like, oh, well, In-N-Out doesn't have chicken strips or whatever, but they don't care. Like, they make what they make, and they're popular because they serve like a very specific need. And I think that's kind of where we're at too, is like, if people want BJ's, they can go to BJ's, but we're going to be In-N-Out.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Perfectly said.
Yep. Okay, Joshua, you're up. Did you get a chance to look at elementary?
Yeah, I did get trust elementary. I've tried it before. It's not bad. Just a few critique things. Honestly, I think it's really good. It comes with a bunch of great options. which I really like. But there's just a few things I want to point out. First thing, the Plymouth theme is very nice. I just suggest a little counter or something, percentage, some way to know like how it's going. Like we're going to use dots, and also a default special wallpaper, maybe. Just an idea. But otherwise, everything is good, and I personally love Pantheon. It gives you a nice Macintosh feeling. So, yeah, best of luck on this project, and yeah, that's all I have to say.
Cool. Thanks very much indeed. Derek, you're up. And I know that you've switched from Manjaro to this, maybe. I think.
Yes, I have. I've been using it for a week, actually. I had it installed before Biddle last week, I believe, if not mistaken. I love the fact that you can set things up after you log in for the first time. The onboarding is really nice. The picture-in-picture, love that. You could use it for videos or text or anything. It all depends on what you want to use it for. I love that. But that's my look on it. The only thing I had trouble with was it took about 30 seconds to reboot uh, most of the time, and the last time I rebooted, it was fine. It didn't take very long at all, but for some reason in the beginning, it was taking about 30 seconds to 45 seconds to restart.
How long does it normally take then for an OS to restart on your kit?
Normally, it takes about 10, 15.
I will say that I heard that a couple times, and I did have that same issue on one of the installs of Elementary where it would just sit there on the, you would hit shutdown or restart, and it would just sit there on the Elementary logo and not do anything for at least a minute or two.
I had that issue also.
Have you guys thought of when it's doing that, press the up arrow and then it will get rid of the splash screen and you can see what it's doing behind?
If I would have
Because
thought about that,
invariably-
I might have
Yeah.
gave you the
The
info.
message is a stop job is running for user session on C2, I believe.
Doesn't
So-
F12 also do that?
Yes.
I think like any key on the keyboard when the splash is showing up.
Oh, is
'Cause,
it?
like
Okay.
I hit escape. I'm like everyone has a different key apparently, but if like I just hit escape and it like
Yeah,
shows
I
the
always-
system D.
Yeah, I've always known escape and then you see everything. And
I
that's what I
will-
really like about Linux.
I wish I would have thought about that, Zeb, but I didn't.
Yeah, I think there's something in the session that's kind of claiming that it's doing work and being like, "Hey, no, don't shut down yet. I'm still doing stuff." And that seems to kind of be an intermittent thing. So we definitely got to figure out why that's
Yeah.
happening.
So I have a question here. Everything seems to default to 90 seconds when it's waiting for something.
It's System
Why?
D.
Yeah, system D.
System
defaults.
D does that.
It's so 10 seconds later, I'm hitting the reset button. I'm not waiting for this. I
Yeah, I
can't
mean maybe
wait
I don't know
around.
if there's a way we can at the distro level change that default. Maybe we should look into that too.
All right,
Eric, you're up, I think.
if he's here. All right,
Over to you, Rocco.
Eris,
Oh, there he is.
yeah, are you here, Eric?
No, I'm not here.
Okay.
This is just a really good touring test simulator. No. Hey, everybody. I was Potato Chip, and I did some extreme distro hopping. I have to. It's Saturday. Why would I ever want to just have a system ready to go for this? Anyway, I have to echo a lot of basically what Zeb said. More or less. So what I did was, I've tried Elementary in the past, and I'm just not a huge Pantheon fan. It's just not for me, and that's fine. I get that everybody, I just like Cassidy said, like the beauty to me of open source is choice, and the fact that we all have the choice. And I know that there are some people that look at it and are just blown away by it. I love that. I'm glad that they find that and that it speaks to them. It just doesn't speak to me. So be it. But this week I actually said I'm going to take time and actually use this because I don't want to just dismiss it out of hand. And really, I think I came up against what Zeb was saying, what Chris was saying, some of the things where I feel like if you're used to the sort of traditional distro paradigm of, you have your built-in default repos, and then you can easily sort of add those things, and it just kind of, most distros work in the same way, right? And elementary is different enough that if you're used to that, you feel like you're sometimes swimming upstream in some respects, where you're kind of fighting against what you would normally do. Like I distro hop all the time, and for me, any of these, Arch based, OpenSUSE, Fedora, Ubuntu based, um, they all work the same in most ways. Yes, they have different package managers and different default software, maybe the desktop environment. They'll do things slightly differently. They might have their own tool sets, but ultimately, to me, they feel very similar. And maybe that's just because of my familiarity with all those different systems. So it's interesting to me whenever I come on to something like elementary, and elementary is not the only one. When we did endless, it was sort of the same way, right? Because endless does things differently enough that it was like, whoa, wait a second, what is this? And that's kind of how I felt. I was trying to do things the way that I would normally do them, and running into some roadblocks that were kind of making it more difficult than I normally would have otherwise had. And so what I realized is they are providing a full experience from the distro level up, not just retheming, not just adding some tools, not just some custom repos or something like that. This is a sort of nuts and bolts fundamental change to the way that Linux is presented and used. And if you come into that with the expectation of using it like just any other distro, then I think you could run into those same situations where it's kind of like, why is it not that way? I'm used to it being that way, and it's not that way. And that's more me responding to that. So that's why I said, it's more about your expectations. I think a lot of the things that they do, that you guys are doing with elementary, and it's why I value the statement, like Cassidy said, like why, when I see something like there's too much fragmentation, right, in the Linux realm, and I think, no, there's not enough. Like they're just, this is the point. Like we have to continue to push the boundaries and try different things, and we all learn from that, and we take things from other experiences we have, and everything ultimately gets better because of it. So so besides just sort of my general kind of, I still don't love Pantheon. It just is what it is. LTS base is also something I struggle with, even with other distros like Zorin and Mint and stuff like that. LTS base on this hardware that I have just doesn't work as well as a newer release. So for those reasons, really, that's what it comes down to, is just I can see why people do like it. I respect that you guys are sort of, you've made your decisions, and you're like you said, it's okay that if you don't like it, you don't have to use it. It's fine. And it's the conclusion I come to is it's great for the people that really look at it, enjoy it, and like the way it's put together. But if you don't, then it's not worth sort of fighting against that, because that's not your ideal. It's not what you're putting out there. And so I respect it. I like what you guys are doing, but it's just, not something that I feel like I could use on an ongoing basis and be happy with. So.
I just do want to add a little caveat there, though, that all of the things that I found like awkward and a bit, really, it was very easy to fix. Just install a bit of software and I can put a PPA in. Install another bit of software and I can put my notification icons back up on the top where I like them. It's not insurmountable. Go and find a theme, a dark theme, please, guys. God, give us a dark theme that you
We're
like.
working on it.
Yeah,
We're working on it.
now everything is okay. And I've got this one final thing with the NVIDIA card. So it's not insurmountable what some people think is in their way. And that's why, I gave it a double thumbs up, because you can get it to work the way you want to, not the way you guys have designed it. But I just think it's fantastic that you have made this decision, you're following it through, and you are presenting it so well that nobody can fault how you're putting it all together. It's absolutely brilliant. Sorry,
Well,
I shouldn't have jumped in there. Yeah.
That's okay. I just add one specific thing, and this is just me. It's a bugaboo I have that I just cannot let go of. I have to have a system tray. I have to. It is simple as that, and it's on. I use GNOME, and I put the app indicators back in, and it fixes the problem, and life goes on. I can live with almost anything else, but I have to have a system tray, and that's just the simple fact of it. So, it is what it is.
That's the battlefield you're going to die on.
That is the hill I will die on. Absolutely.
Go ahead, Dan. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, you should watch my talk. I gave a talk at Linux App Summit about this. And I think I can convince you that if you want a system tray, you actually hate freedom.
You know what? I would gladly say that I hate freedom if you give me a system tray.
Can you give us the Cliff Note version?
Sure. Well, I mean, the super short version of it is that the way like the notification tray API is that developers have to do things the exact same way, no matter what desktop environment you're running. And so this is bad for diversity because it means that desktop environments can't handle the way applications want to present this data in a unique way. It's bad for accessibility because desktop environments can't make things done in a different, more accessible way. Like, for example, you're an application and you want to present like quick set of actions to a user, right? Well, we have a free desktop spec for that actually, so this is already solved. But for the desktop environments, like you can do different things. A desktop environment can choose to show it as like an icon in a tray in the top panel if they really want to, or like we do, they could make it completely searchable through the applications menu, or they could show it in a right-click menu on a dock or in an application launcher. So,
or you could have a voice control interface for that, like same information using the existing spec.
And I'll just tell you that having this one API that's supposed to like do everything, it does it really poorly, and it makes it so people can't innovate and they can't make things different and diverse. It like forces you to think exactly the way the API designer wants you to think, and nobody gets a choice in having any other alternatives.
So, but to me, and again, I'm telling you this as my own personal perspective. Without providing me an alternative, you've taken away my choice. And so that's how I see it. Yes, that's a technical problem for you to solve. But in the meantime, what you've done is you've made Telegram desktop and Discord and all of these other apps that expect me to have a tray system. They don't work. So
yeah, you should complain to those app developers and tell them like, hey, these free desktop standards have existed for like 10 years. And why are you using like a deprecated API that everybody's been saying is no longer maintained and it's not secure? And like tell them like there's new stuff that they need to actually care about Linux and care about free desktop.
Okay.
So basically we can deduce from that Eric, you hate freedom.
No, I hate politics. That's what I hate. I'm a user. I'm not a developer. I'm not the one that's making these decisions. All I know is that whenever I use something, if it doesn't do what I want it to do, and I can't, through my own effort, make it do what I want it to do, then that's what it leaves me in an impossible position. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I'm sure there's a better way to do it, but it doesn't solve my problem. So there you go.
That's why I hate that API. I can't make it do what I want it to do. It doesn't solve my problem.
Right. All right. Eris, did you get a chance to try Elementary?
Yes, I did. I tried it. I have several notes, so I try to go as fast as possible to give people time. The welcome screen, when you go into the welcome screen, I think it should really like the first thing I should ask is if you have Wi-Fi or you have internet enabled. Otherwise, it should help you set up Wi-Fi, because if you click on the links, it doesn't take you anywhere, and I think that really hinders the experience because that's the first thing that pops up. You haven't set up Wi-Fi if you have a laptop, and I think that would be a great change.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's actually currently in the installer, so we want to move that probably to the initial setup, which is something we're going to do in the next version of Elementary OS. So that way, you will get prompted with that when you set up the computer, and because that's in a weird place right now.
Yeah, and ideally you can sign into your like online accounts and stuff once you have Wi-Fi before you're even in your session necessarily. Yeah.
Also, when you use like the volume shortcut to like raise up the volume, lower the volume, I did not get the pop up going through Windows. Like if I had like let's say a full screen video, it wouldn't show up.
Hmm.
Uh,
Did you
th-
have
Think of it
to, yeah,
should show
see,
up on full screen. I think full screen suppresses those.
this is using Firefox. I was watching the YouTube video and it wouldn't show up. I had the video full screen and I would raise the volume, lower the volume. No pop up would show the volume that I was raising or lowering. Well, since we're talking about the compositing, I will give you a lot of credit for the alt tab. That's like the best alt tab I think in any Linux distro that I think I've used. That it darkens the whole desktop and only shows you the active window. I think that's the way it should be done.
That's awesome. That's fun to hear because I feel like people who like it don't usually say anything about it, but people who don't like it usually make their opinions heard very loudly. So it's good to hear that there are people who like that design.
I used the printer application to set up my network printer. It was very simple, very straightforward. I did have an issue because I have a external monitor and I have a laptop, and I tried disabling my internal monitor for the laptop, and I could not do it with the display manager. It just would never turn it off. I tried getting all the updates. I started restarting it. I couldn't do it within the live session or when after I installed it. So what I ended up doing, I had to do, I think going to the settings, like the deep settings into Linux to disable the monitor itself. But other than that, I could never disable it.
yeah, I think multi-display stuff is kind of a work in progress because I don't think many of us have multiple displays. Like I don't have multiple displays, so I'm kind of like, I don't know, like, can someone test this please and like see if this fixed it? And like it can be a little hard to work on stuff when you don't have the hardware.
So I have a NVIDIA chipset, and usually when I use the Nouveau drivers, I get less tearing, and this way it was the other way around. When I had the Nouveau drivers on, it was a lot of tearing, screen tearing, and then once I put the proprietary drivers in, the screen tearing went away. So that was interesting versus other distros. Um, Also, I don't know if you guys don't like that, but I really miss the ability to hold Alt and do right click or left click to make the window bigger or move the window. That I really miss that from as an option because it doesn't. If you don't know about it, it doesn't get in your way and it's just there. Just
Yeah,
gives you
it's
more
actually there
resource.
with super. You can super click to move or super click and drag to move. Super, I think right click resizes.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So it's super instead of Alt then.
Yeah, we should probably put that in the keyboard shortcut overlay maybe. I think I have a design somewhere for more like mouse keyboard combination gestures. It's kind of weird to know where to put that information though.
And the last thing, and this is just subjective because it's all about looks, but the login screen, I don't know. For me, it's like a step backwards because the one thing I love about the Slick greeter is that you got you pick the big wallpaper and it really shows off the wallpaper. And this one's such a tiny window. I wish it was just the image of the person, the avatar, and the name, and then the background would switch over if that was possible instead.
Yeah, we're looking at a couple of design options there to iterate on it. One idea is, make those cards bigger depending on the size of your display. I know there's an experimental branch with like a blurred out background behind the cards, so it's definitely something we're looking into.
Yeah, a couple of the challenges we faced with the design of the greeter was really making things more accessible for folks who maybe need a larger click area. Like in the old design, it was kind of hard to tell, like, oh, where do you click to get the user to actually like switch over? And then it made the the entry where you type in your password was kind of like hard to see and stuff. So we really focused on like having really accessible contrast and making sure it was very clear where you can click and move things. But yeah, we've been looking at a few different designs for, especially if you have only a single user on a computer. I can see how like, there's a lot of just empty space. So we're trying to figure out a way to make use of that space without losing some of those accessibility gains that we made.
Having said that, I don't know if this is default, but with the Sleek greeter. But the one thing that I did find great was that if you press right, you would go to the next user. You press left arrow, and that was great by itself.
Excellent. All right, Eris, thank you for that. Tony, second time today. How are you today? Again, sir.
Good, thanks. And you?
Good, good. Did you get a chance to check out Elementary this week?
Yes, I did. I've used it before. I do love the way it looks. I was a Mac user in the past for 10 years, so it sort of brought back memories of what was a good-looking system at that time in Mac. The only problem I got with it really is that I'm a little bit like yourself and Zeb, that I come to Linux in order to be able to customize things and get things the way I want them to be. As good as Elementary looks, and I do really appreciate the work that you guys are doing to make it and to do it the way that you want to do it, it's great if you use it as it comes. But if you want to customize it, and I'm a relative newbie to Linux, even though it's been 18 months now, I'm still sort of learning bits and pieces. I can't install some of the software that I want to install. So I don't feel comfortable using it as a daily driver. I'd love to be able to, because I do love the way it is. But that's kind of where I am with it, really.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that there's software that you're not able to install. Do you know what format that it's come in?
Well, I couldn't work out how to get Zoom installed, for argument's sake.
Okay, yeah. So I think that we discovered there's a Zoom flat pack, but there's also a Zoom deb file. There's an app in App Center called Eddie, I think. That
Eddie, yeah.
and Eddie's a good .deb side loader, but we're trying to focus on enabling Flatpak because of kind of the security and really stability concerns that come with the old packaging formats. Like, I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize that, especially with at least deb packages, that at the time that they install, you give them control of your computer, and sometimes they do pretty nasty things like changing your software sources, or like I think the Chrome package at one point was like renaming what device you're discoverable as on the network, and they can do pretty nasty things. So we want to move towards a more kind of sandboxed future where the applications don't affect the system stability.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just think as a relatively new user, maybe it would be possible to give some instruction to say, look, if you wish to install other software that's not available in our store, these are the options that you've got. Maybe it's just me being stupid, but I can't always work things out.
Well, and that's fine. It's like I said, I think we are all, this group in particular, right? We're all fairly seasoned Linux users. I mean, yes, Tony, you're saying 18 months, but that's long enough. You've installed a lot of distros. I mean, you kind of know your way around, and that's fine. This is good feedback that I'm sure these guys want to hear. I mean, this is the type of thing that if a random person grabs Elementary, what types of things are they going to come up against? And that's the kind of feedback I'm sure that makes sense to them. If we all just said it's great, move, it probably doesn't help them very much. I'm sure they would feel good about it, but it might not help very much. So anyway, it's good, I feel, to see this kind of feedback, and I think that's what's great about this group, is that we tend to be pretty honest about, look, this is what I did, and it either worked or it didn't. So anyway, all right, Colin, Mr. PCTLC, how are you tonight?
Yes, I'm very well, thanks. I am a little bit unstable tonight, according to Zoom. My internet's unstable, so if I missed something I said, I can just easily repeat it, no problem. I'm running Elementary. I'm on it now, and I thought I'd try it out for today, and everything seems to be running well. I do agree with Aris on the welcome screen. It's good that you guys have made a start on the welcome screen, and I'm sure it's just something you can build upon. Yeah, a link to the Flat Hub would probably be nice on the welcome screen, just to give people a bit of a heads up on where to go to get Flatpak. Because one good thing I've noticed is you go to Flatpak, you just click install, which is the intended way to install something, and it actually installs Flatpak and also the Flatpak in the software center. So I didn't have to use a terminal. So I thought that was a big plus for that. So I thought that was I don't know how you've done it. You just got it, must be scripted in the background to add itself into the software center. So you only need to install one and it's all there. So I thought that was really good. I'm using it as intended. I haven't put no tweak tool. I haven't added any PPAs. I'm just running elementary as elementary was intended. I like your shortcuts. Your keyboard shortcuts are quite nice. And Alt Tab, like Ara said, is awesome as well. I quite like that as well because it just seems to highlight the windows very nicely with that darkened background. That's quite awesome as well. So other than that, yeah, I did used to not sort of I run elementary back in the second release, I think it was. I can't remember the name of it, but that used to have an awesome conky with weather and news and all that, and that all disappeared, and the tweak disappeared and all that, and I thought, I just wasn't happy with all that. But I can see that the way you guys have designed it is quite awesome. It's coherent across the board. Even flat packs don't look too bad, I must say, in elementary, to be honest. So it's running well. I think you just have to be able to adapt to the way elementary works. I've been trying to use workspaces, and you've got that, what do you call it? The multitasking view, which makes it quite easy to swap workspaces as well. And you can also use the super and down key as well for all those things. So I think it's looking really good, runs well, and printers are just working, so that's all good. So I'm pretty happy with the way this release has been. So the welcome screen is a good addition, I must say, for that, and the flat packs as well. Thought that was easy to install. No other system has been able to go to Flat Hub, just click the install button and have it install. So that's one thing I've noticed. So great job, guys. I think it's coming along nicely.
I'm really glad to hear that you had a really good experience with Flatpak. I think that's something that we've been working on quite a bit, is making sure that that's pretty seamless to do.
Yep.
All right. I hate to say that we should cut people short, because I don't want to cut people short, but if we don't keep it to a minimum, we won't get through everybody. So, Dan Kelly, did you try elementary?
Yeah. Yes, I did. I've been using it for about 5 days. I'd mostly the same experience that a lot of the other people had. The installer worked fine. The greeting screen when you log in looks great. Unlike Zeb with his multi-monitors, I had an opposite effect. I was able to find wallpapers that actually could span between 2 monitors and look perfectly seamlessly together. And I even posted a picture in Discourse of my desktop with a single wallpaper. There's like 3 of them that come with elementary that can do that and look wonderful. Audio and video performance and hardware performance is absolutely awesome. I didn't have any trouble with any of these things, and some of the issues I've had with other distros, with the monitor having screen tearing lines in it while I'm gaming and stuff like that, I didn't experience any of that with this distro. The printer works really good. I had some trouble with some .mozilla profile folders, porting them over so I could use the distro and get my email, but that's besides the point. One thing I didn't like is the music app. When you open it up, it automatically wants to populate everything in your music folder. I find that kind of intrusive. And I stay away from them kind of programs that actually we just want to add everything in your music folder to its population. The super key, love this way the super key works. You hit it, you get a list of all the key bindings that you can do. That works great. The distro plays games excellent. I played about 5 different games on it. They all work great. I have one game though that's kind of iffy because it's silver with proton and it freezes up now and then. Hit that super key, it shows you which keys to push to get out of it, and you're out of it. And that's just awesome. I also experienced extremely long shutdown times. Every single time. I mean, we're getting into a minute or more for it to shut down. I got to the point where it's easier just to suspend the computer. And it's a beautiful distro. I'd like the ability to tinker with it a little more under the hood, but other than that, I could use it and be comfortable with it, but who knows? And that's my take on it.
That's really interesting feedback about the auto import and music. I think we'll definitely have to have a discussion about that.
Yeah, there's a on the side, on the left side, it just starts populating all your music and from the folder you opened. I don't know if it's pulling the whole songs in or just the names of them all, but you have to hit the stop button at the top to stop it. I'm the kind of person, because I use Clementine and I just copy and paste my stuff into Clementine as much as I'm going to play, and it runs like that. And if I want to change it or modify it, that's how I kind of prefer to do it. I don't like something that goes right in and just decides it's going to make a big list of everything you got in that folder, because who knows what's in it, and who knows where it's storing it.
Right. All right, Dan, thank you. Appreciate it, man. Barb.
You're welcome.
Okay. I am now running the third time of trying to install it. And I think what I'm running this time, the first 2 times I tried it, it gave me an installer crashed. And what I was trying to do was have my home directory on a different drive, different physical drive. And I don't know if that was the problem or not. So now I'm just doing it. I'm just trying to see if it will install on the one drive. So I don't know if that is a problem with the USB, with the installer, or what the problem is. So I'm just going to see what's happening. That's as far as I've gotten. But I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Has anybody else tried to install it where the home directory is on a different drive?
I'll do that on my desktop computer, and it seems to work. But
okay. But
again, it could be very hardware specific. Or I know Ubiquity occasionally has interesting bugs. That's part of the reason we're working on a new installer for our next release as well.
Okay.
I didn't have a problem either, so.
Weird. All right, well, let us know how it goes on, Barbara. Appreciate that. Chicken, you've probably not got much to say, so we'll go straight on to. Oh, no, sorry, come on, Chicken.
I just want to say I love this release. My thoughts on Elementary OS are very outspoken, and I love this release. But I'm not going to take up anyone else's time. I'm going to go ahead and let the next person give feedback.
All right, cool. Tyler, Mr. Christmas, you are up, sir.
All right, I gave it a go last night, and start with the good. Cohesive look, cohesive ecosystem, default applications look great. The picture-in-picture mode is great. The alt-tap switcher reminds me a lot of the way Plasma is, where it focuses the application you want, and I like that. On to some of the iffy, I would love it if there was a dark mode. Dark mode would be fantastic. I had a bit of a weird experience adding flat packs. By default, I always tend to go to the terminal, but when I did that, they didn't go to the App Center. I actually had to remove Flat Hub and then add it by installing a piece of software just to get apps to show up. And that was a bit of a weird experience for me compared to how I do it elsewhere.
Yeah, the difference with the Flatpak stuff is system versus user installations. And we have open issues against both Sideload and App Center to allow system installations, but we do user installations by default.
Okay. So if I were to add it in the terminal as a user installation, it would show. Okay.
Yep.
And the other weirdness I ran into, is the default shortcut for changing input methods. I've been playing with the Dvorak keyboard layout lately, is Alt-Shift. If I want to go backwards on the Alt-Tab switcher, I'm changing keyboard layouts at the same time. And I've run into a few moments where I went backwards like that, started typing, and next thing I know, I'm looking at gibberish. So that was on the iffy. But the deal breaker for me is as great as some of these elementary apps are, I want to use applications like Quassel. I want to use applications like Mumble, and they're cute applications. I could either use the old version that's in the repos and they pull a Dwayda, they don't use the elementary theme, and that's a Dwayda is susceptible. Or I could use a Flatpak and they don't fit in at all. And I like the elementary theme, but when a lot of the applications I'm using are not fitting in and from the greater Linux ecosystem, that's a deal breaker for me. I also had an issue with Fractal, which is a matrix client for that has a header bar and everything. That gave me issues as a Flatpak as well. And I know there's a lot of issues on the theming side for Flatpak, and it's not entirely Elementary's fault, but it is having to choose between that or the older version of the application was a deal breaker for me.
All right. Eric, you going?
Yeah, I thought I was going with Sleepy, but Nate's next. Anyway,
Well,
yes.
Sleepy's next on our screen, I think.
Oh, well, there you go. It's Zoom. Darn you, Zoom. Anyway, Mr. Cubicle Nate, how are you, sir?
Wait, so it's not Sleepy next?
No, you're next on my screen.
Okay.
So you're going next.
Fair enough. All right. Okay, so I want to start off with what I like about Elementary. I like that you have a stubborn design intent, and I don't think you should change your design intent. So anything that I say, just go ahead and ignore, okay, from this point forward. You obviously have a goal, and you're sticking with it, and I absolutely implore that you continue along that path, because I'm a walking edge case. So just so you understand the ground rules here. All right, so the lack of a minimize button, even though Super H works, I kept forgetting Super H because I have problems, I guess. I like minimize. I know you. I remember hearing you have a reason for minimize, like it's a pointless something, but I like it. It may be pointless, but I like it. It's kind of like the same reason I put chocolate chips in my ice cream. It's kind of pointless, but I like it. It's along that line. The the dock for me, if I had more than one application open, because sometimes I double click and you kind of remove the double click feature, even though you left some of the double click settings there. I inadvertently had an extra application and I couldn't get to it through the dock. I had to slide things around. So I don't know what's up with that, but that the minimize would have fixed that problem and I could have gotten to the other application because I couldn't do it through the dock. So Firefox is not installed by default. You go with Epiphany, and Epiphany doesn't seem quite to be feature parity with Firefox. So I had to install it because I couldn't stream videos off my MB server with Epiphany. Don't know why. It just kind of sat there and spun, but it worked fine in Firefox. So I don't know if that's maybe an issue with Epiphany, but just throwing it out there. I'm gonna have to go ahead and argue with you about the system tray thing. So I know I understand your lack of freedom thing, but the thing that kind of caught me was you spoke of the lack of security. Now, are you referring to the XEmbed API or the status notifier API? Because I know the status notifier API is kind of like what Plasma uses. I think they still capture XEmbed if it doesn't have it, but they use status notifier, which is the newer standard. I believe that is the newer standard. And so most applications use that, I think. But things like Discord and Telegram, are they using XEmbed instead? Is that the issue?
So I think there's like 2 or 3 different and that's kind of the funny thing about it, right? Is that people are like, oh, well, there's not even one API. There's a bunch of different system tray ones. And one of them is XEmbed. One of them is the Ubuntu Ayatana app indicator stuff. And I think that's what the KDE stuff is based off of, is the Ayatana work.
It's the other way around. The status notifier is what Ubuntu adopted for Unity. for the application notifier later on.
Well, they definitely didn't use the XEmbed on that one because it was debus menu based.
Right, no. But anyway, so that also just made for a usability issue. Also, like I gotta have a system tray. I mean, it's something. It's a nice. It's kind of like it's like that
Comfy
place
pair
on
of
your
slippers.
desk. Yeah, that too. But it's a place on your desk where you keep like your pens and your scissors and things when you need it. And although there might be a better way to store my pens and scissors, it's just the way I liked it. Just the way I like it. But anyway, so there are some other things too about flat pack and whatnot. But those are we don't need to beat any dead horses. And again, I'm an edge case, but I do want to say I appreciate your stubbornness, and I hope you stick with it.
Thanks.
Just as a quick fix for your accessing the window behind the window, if you use your mouse scroll wheel on the dock icon, you can like scroll between active windows of that type.
Where were you 3 days ago?
In the Telegram group helping me.
Yeah,
He was a busy guy this week.
I will say that I would like to. I know Zeb mentioned it, but I'll say that Chicken did a great job helping. I mean, he 2 or 3 of the tips that he put out, like control right click on the dock, and then you can change some of the settings, little things like that made it my use of the system a lot easier that weren't sort of self-apparent. And so he was a great steward and a great sort of ambassador for elementary this week. All right, Vince, you're after Nate on my screen, so now you're up, I guess. So anyway, good to see you, Vince. How are you today? Did you get a chance to check out elementary?
Yeah, I was saying I was happy to be skipped if people want to talk as well, but I'll be very, very quick. Basically, I really enjoyed my experience. I only have 2 thumbs, so I'm going to give it 2 thumbs up this week. That's all I got to say. I want to hear what everyone else has to say about it.
Okay. Well, thank you for being brief then.
Mhm.
Mr. Dreaming Wolf, Dave, how are you, sir?
Excellent. How are you?
Just fine, thank you. And did you get a chance to try it?
Yes, I did. I very much like the no frills installer. The only thing I noticed about it was at the end of it, it just closed. There wasn't an auto reboot to do it. You actually had to go into the system and tell it to reboot, which is something I wasn't used to, but that's fine. The 2 things I missed, I personally like going into settings to be able to find a numlock setting in the keyboard settings to set it there rather than in case I forget to turn it on before I reboot, so that every time, no matter what I do, it's going to start when I log in. Mozilla, Firefox, and Thunderbird. I have a lot of email addresses, and so I keep my Firefox and Mozilla configuration files set in my home folder on a separate drive, which Barbara, I just installed it normally, then wiped the home drive and symlink everything in from the other drive. Worked fine for me.
That's what I figured I'd have to do.
It does, and it works fine.
Okay, great. Thank you.
The only problem I had was that we were coming off of the new Ubuntu releases, so all my Thunderbird configuration files were for the latest version of Thunderbird, and the LTS version is a couple back, and it didn't want to load, so I couldn't get Thunderbird, which actually brought me to the one thing I did finally manage to break it. And the only way I could break this system, because everything else I pounded it with, it worked fine. Took it like Zeb, it took me all of 5 minutes, all the tweaks I wanted to make. Took me no more than 5 minutes to figure out how to do it, get it done, and just go on. Also, I want to thank Chicken because that control right click on the on the dock was a lifesaver for me. But yeah, I went in and changed the Etsy apt sources list, went in there and changed everything from Bionic to Aeon.
Oh no!
Oh no! Actually, the only
Hilarity
thing that
ensued.
screwed it up, was that it wanted to update the kernel and then delete the kernel that you guys had done, which was the same version. So it installed, 5.3, 023, and then it took it out. So there was no kernel when I rebooted. But that was the thing I could possibly do to it to make it not function. It was solid. It was beautiful. It worked for me. I'm not crazy about running off of LTSs, but that's personal choice. So hats off to you guys. You made one that's very hard to break.
Thanks. That's actually hilarious that it almost worked, because we do run some builds on AON just to like test to see if things are breaking so we can fix them ahead of time. Because we're working on rebasing on Focal right now, but that's kind of hilarious that AON almost worked for you.
If you hadn't of automatically updated the kernel, I think it would have.
Yeah, and I don't know what mechanism that is. That's the Ubuntu underlying stuff trying to upgrade.
Yeah, because we use the H2 kernel. We don't make our own kernel. We use theirs.
Yeah, that's just
Do you use the
kernel.
LTS kernel, or do you use an updated kernel?
It's the LTS hardware enablement kernel.
Well, Dave, very, very impressive that you figured out a way to break it. Good job. I leave it to you to come up with those things.
By the way, I run Arch.
Oh no.
All right. Cheese bacon.
Hey everybody. How's it going tonight?
Sir?
Doing well. So I've got a little list that I had written up here. Full disclosure, I am a Patreon supporter of Elementary. I love what you guys do.
Thank you.
I love the elegant design. I love the fact that, and I've been a Linux user for many years, I love customizing my distro just like everyone else. But I do really like the fact that I can install it out of the box and get straight to work. I like that there's minimal amount of bloatware and applications installed by default. So that really allows me to kind of dig into the specific applications that I like to use. I like, again, that the apps that are there are written by you guys, so they all contain that same sort of design language. And it's obviously, in going back to kind of what Tyler was saying, it's got to be a nightmare to try and get every theme to work with every application. But the integration that you guys have done with the apps that you have are wonderful. The new Flatpak sideload feature is great. I really do like that. I think that this personally is a distribution that I could hand to any one of my family members, my parents, and they could get right to work with zero problems. It's very simple in that regard. I think the night shift feature is really neat, though it's not something that I particularly use. The do not disturb function is priceless, especially if you're trying to get work done. It's great to be able to just flip that switch and not get bugged by various different notifications. So overall, I think it's a great distribution. Again, I'm a supporter. I like what you guys are doing. I like that you're stubborn in your design, and I like that you continue to evolve. So every step is there's new stuff in every step, and the evolution of Elementary, I think, is only going to continue to grow, and really give developers a good place to go to develop applications. Let me see here. Let me check my notes one more time. One thing that's not been mentioned that I really do appreciate, and I've not seen in any other distro, is with the App Center, it gives you the opportunity to donate directly to the developers. And I think that that's a huge thing. I think that really encourages developers to seek out a distribution that they can go and get donations directly for their hard work. And I think that it's all important that we give back. And I think that that's really the only way we're going to get these applications that might be missing from the Linux ecosystem into the Linux ecosystem, is encouraging developers and giving them a place that they can have direct donations. On that note, and I mentioned this to you, Cassidy, in a LUP episode, what I would like to see in the future, and maybe something that you guys could work on, would be a way to manage the App Center, so that I could log into the App Center, see everything that I've purchased before, and be able to reinstall all of those applications that I've purchased previously. And for anyone that doesn't know, if you're in the App Center and you see an application that says it's $10 or whatever, you can enter 0 and still download the application. Though I would encourage you, if you use it, to go back and donate to that project, because that's what continues the evolution of these applications. A couple of things, negatives. One is the lack of a partitioning application. So, I mean, I know that fdisk is there, but I'd like to see something like disk or some sort of a GUI partitioning application available by default. I think that would be great. I'd already mentioned the account for App Center. I think would be great. I'd also love to see a fingerprint reader solution, similar to what GNOME 3.4 has by default. I think that that's just a great feature to have. Not having it in elementary, but having it on Ubuntu and other distributions, I really have begun to use that a lot, especially with this ThinkPad that I'm running it on. Also, a simple note-taking or word processing type application I think would be great. I know Code is there, and Code is great. But one of the things that Chicken turned me on to was Quilter, which is a nice little markdown application. I've been using that. And then one question that I had is, I noticed, and specifically with Zoom tonight, trying to get it installed, that it was not available in the App Center, not as a flat pack even. And so I'm curious, do you guys not pull everything from FlatHub? Do you kind of like cherry pick certain applications that are pulled in for the sideload feature, or how does that work? I mean, I was able to go directly to flathub.org, pull down and install it, no problem. It shows up in the App Center, and I can uninstall it, no problem. But is there a method to how you guys choose what applications are shown
No,
in sideload?
we don't curate anything in App Center that's under the non-curated heading there. That's including any Flatpak sources that aren't from elementary. I just searched for it in my App Center right now and it showed up, but I also just installed it from Flatpak, so I'm not sure. Had you previously installed a Flatpak before?
No.
Okay, so yeah, we don't show Flatpak. We don't show any Flatpak. Like, there aren't any Flatpak remotes installed on elementary OS until you first install a Flatpak. So when you first install a Flatpak, it adds that remote for that Flatpak, and any other apps from that remote will show up in App Center after that point. So that could be what you were seeing.
Yeah, I mean, just from the default installation, I just typed in Zoom in App Center and tried to pull it down from there, and I wasn't able to see it. But I did see additional, other non-curated apps.
Yeah,
Zoom
so
wasn't available. So
those other non-curated out of the box would have been from the Ubuntu repos, but no Flatpak remotes had been added yet.
Okay, great. Okay, nice to know. But
Thanks a ton
really,
for being a
overall, I
supporter
think
on Patreon, by the way.
Oh yeah, dude. I love you guys, and I have been for a bit. I love the work that you do. I think you really are doing something different in the Linux ecosystem, and I really appreciate that. So
Thanks.
keep up the good work, man. And
Yeah, thank you.
That's all from me.
Very nice. Very nice. Daniel Foray, welcome to Biddle. Did you try elementary this week?
Oh, I was thinking about it, but I'm so busy. And
Yeah, I know.
maybe I'll try it later.
Okay. Alan, how are you?
I'm doing just fine. Can you guys hear me all right now?
We can hear you now, but depending on your connection, maybe not. So go ahead, quick.
Well, no, my computer was overheating. That's why it was doing that. But all right. I did try elementary. I did run into a few problems, and one was with power management, and a couple it hangs during the install, not during the install, but during the shutdown. But then while I was trying to watch YouTube, when I hit maximize, not maximize but full screen, it would automatically try and suspend it after 20 minutes. And I went and I disabled it in power management. It kept doing it. And when I tried so many things like caffeine and all that stuff, it just kept on trying to suspend after 20 minutes of watching a video. I have never had distro on this laptop ever do that. another thing is, it kind of confused me when I went to install a flat pack from the terminal that there were no remotes installed, but that wasn't necessarily a big thing. I just went and added the remote by myself. The other thing that I see that I had a slight issue with was the non-curated warning. Now I understand why you do that, but and there are several common Linux apps that are not curated by you at all, like LibreOffice and stuff, and GIMP, and these are common Linux apps, and I don't think that these should display a warning when you go and try and install them from the App Store. But some people might not like that, and some people might actually get confused by that. So, but that's about all I had problems with.
Yeah, the non-curated messaging specifically, I know there's a few open issues on looking at, being more precise with that wording and explaining a little bit better. That's definitely like a first iteration. So we're looking at ways we can clarify that even better.
Well, one way is just have a "Why am I seeing this warning?" button, and then it takes it to the documentation on the website, and then it has a detailed explanation. That might be something that you might consider doing instead of trying to fit it right in a small little box.
Yeah, sort of a learn more pattern.
Yeah, I learn more. But I do like the ability to turn that off, because someone like me, I just don't care. If it causes a problem, I'll fix it. But that was about it. But the thing is, I did love your desktop environment. It looked very pretty. Except I'm with Eric on this one. I need my system tray. But I was trying to capture video for my YouTube channel, and the software I use would not work at all because it didn't have a system tray. It would just crash out immediately. So so based off of that and a couple other issues that I had, it's just not for me. But I wouldn't have a problem recommending your operating system to someone just starting Linux. That's about it for me.
All right. Thank you, Alan. Paul, you said that you weren't able to get it installed. All right, Paul, thank you very much. Are you there, Paul?
Oh. He had said to skip him. So.
Okay. All right. We're skipping him. Wendy, how you been?
I've been pretty good. It's great to see all of you.
Yeah. So did you get a chance to try elementary this week?
I didn't even know what it was. I just had I just had a few minutes, and so I thought I'd come say hi. So no, I haven't tried it.
Well, it is good to see you. You haven't been here in a while, and I know everybody feels the same way, so I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
All right, JJ, sounds like you're up, my friend. Are you there? And did you try elementary?
I'm here. Unfortunately, with this busy week of finals, I didn't get a chance to test out elementary, but I do appreciate what these dudes are doing with regards to their paradigm, and I may be one of the people outside of their mission, I guess, but I do understand why there's a reason why Linux has so many distributions. It's so many reasons for choice. So good that they're marketing to their demographic, I would say.
Cool. All right then. Well, thanks very much indeed. Bill, I noticed you've just come in, but I'm sure you've got something to say about elementary. Bill, come in, Bill. Okay, maybe not. Rocco, back to you.
All right. So I did install elementary on both machines, like I had said, and I'm sorry, I just love elementary. Obviously, my main machine is Pop OS, and it has been Pop OS, but on this test machine, elementary will stay as the main operating system, and obviously there's another drive to test on, but elementary is going to stay because I absolutely love it. I love the elegance of it, the overall everything. We had a discussion on Biddle Europe, and Eric had asked the question. Everybody says elementary is beautiful, and why? Tell me exactly why it is beautiful. And it's not just one thing. It is the whole system that's put together. It is the plank dock that is the best looking plank version out there. It is the transparent panel. It is the cohesiveness of the notification area where everything just goes together. The theme itself is clean and awesome looking. I can't put my finger on one thing, and then Alan Pope jumped in and said it's just a matter of how elegant it is, and I can't put it any better than that. So I absolutely love it. I did run into one or two issues that I'm going to bring up if I can check my notes here. If you got, I don't know, for the onboarding, how extensive do you guys plan on making the onboarding thing? Is it something that you have a limit where you're going to stop at some point, or are you continually going to add to it? Because I got a suggestion.
I think we want to make sure that anything that goes in onboarding is, I guess there's a really high bar for it to get into onboarding. So we don't want to throw every single feature of the entire operating system into onboarding because that's just overwhelming. And then it turns into this like long process of learn about how to use every single thing. So it's features that we've heard specifically people didn't know about in the past, or features that are brand new and kind of maybe different from how most computers work or how computers have worked in the past. So there's a really high bar, but I'm curious to hear your idea.
Well, both of my screens are high DPI. So when I first install the system and I get greeted with the onboarder, it is, obviously everything is extremely tiny until I go in and hit the display settings and check the little drop-down menu for, the high DPI. But if that could be right in the onboarding, maybe even not even be there, but maybe something that it could automatically detect if it's a high DPI screen based on the resolution.
It should. There's logic to do that in the GNOME settings daemon, which we use under the hood. So I'd be curious what the exact size and resolution of your displays are. There might be something not being communicated properly.
Well,
because it should automatically do 2x scaling for high DPI.
Yeah, it's a 4K screen. So what is that? 30. What is that? 30,
what size is it then?
30,
What physical
40
size?
by 2160.
Yeah, that's it, chicken. Yeah, that's it. So it didn't automatically detect that. So
what physical size is it?
27 inch.
Okay, yeah. So that's in a weird gray area where like it's not really possible to know how far away from the screen you are. So it's not really. We don't know if we should do 1x scaling because some people want 1x scaling, and we don't know if we could do 2x scaling because some people want 2x because they sit farther away. So it's in
the Zeb zone.
Yeah, it's in that weird middle zone. So I think 192 DPI or something is what GNOME settings daemon uses to calculate whether it should switch to 2x or not. So yeah, I'm not sure the right way to handle that, but
yeah, that's an interesting candidate though. I think for maybe initial setup. I think things that's like something you'd only do once for the entire machine.
Yeah.
We want to do an initial setup, like when you're
True.
creating the very first user of the system, and only do things that are each user chooses their own choices for that specific user, not for the computer in the welcome. But that's definitely something that is probably a really good candidate for initial setup. I think since there are some things that are maybe we could like specifically say if it's in this weird gray zone, we'll ask you. But if it's like really clear, we'll just do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, one question I had about the flat packs: is there a plan on adding them to the App Center, or is it always going to be made through Sideload?
So our plan is, at least as of right now, and this can change, but plan right now is to have the App Center curated apps be flat packed. So right now they're delivered via an elementary curated Debian repository, basically. And the idea is to move those over to a flat pack repo. As far as other flat pack repos, like third-party repositories like FlatHub, we've talked a bit about this. I think at this point right now, we're not comfortable with just adding it out of the box. there's questions around the policy of what developers are allowed to do as far as submitting their apps and updating their apps on FlatHub and the security policies around those things. Like right now, once somebody can submit an app to FlatHub, then there's basically little or no checks after that, and they can update and change their permission model and get more access to things without anything raising any flags, which is problematic. But of course, there's things we could do in App Center to work around that or to expose that to users. So I think right now there's no plans to add any third-party repositories like that out of the box, but we're talking with FlatHub folks and Flatpak, the developers working on Flatpak itself, and we're always kind of shifting what we might do.
Mm-hmm. And just so you know, Rocco, our monitors are 163 because I've got a 27-inch 4K as well.
You know,
So
I believe Cassidy has a cool tool for that in App
do.
Center.
I didn't plug it, but I should have. Yeah, go install
plug
Dippy. DIPPI is the name of the app, Dippy. And you can punch in the physical size and resolution, and it will tell you basically whether or not you're going to have a good experience in high DPI or low DPI, or if it's kind of in that middle ground. The reason I actually originally developed it was to help people making purchasing decisions on displays, because they're like, I just don't know what resolution I actually want, like on my laptop or on a desktop. And so it's a really simple algorithm to basically figure out whether or not it's going to be very clearly 1x or 2x scaling, or if it's going to be in that weird middle ground.
Well, if I may plug another one of your apps, it is the browser. Is it Ephemeral?
Ephemeral, yeah.
Yeah, that is absolutely, that hits the mark perfectly.
Thank you.
It is basically a private browsing web browser. Oh, go ahead. You explain what it is. You can do it better than I can.
Sure. So if anybody's ever used Firefox Focus on mobile, I think that's on Android and iOS. I was heavily inspired. I basically wanted Focus on my desktop and it didn't exist, so I made it. It's a really lightweight, like intentionally stripped down browser that is just a WebKit window, basically. The idea is you can set it as your default browser. And so when you click a link in like Slack or Discord or whatever, by default, that link gets opened in this like private, ephemeral, private browsing session. No cookies are shared anywhere, and it's kind of contained. But then if it's something that you want to actually pop open in your real browser and log into something, there's just a one-click way to do that. And it's also nice for like if you're doing shopping results, or like I've heard of people using it for like airline checking, because like airlines save cookies and change the prices based on how many times you've looked at the prices. So it's really nice because it's like it's private by default. So it's like you're always opening incognito, and then you're opting into, or I guess you're opting out of privacy, or opting into a full browser after that. So I built it because it was something I wanted, but I've heard a lot of people really liked it, so I keep working on it.
Yep, it's fantastic.
Cool. Yeah. One other quick question, and I don't think it's specific to Elementary, but do you guys know why the nightlight only works on 2 of my 3 monitors? Doesn't work on, and it can be randomly on depending on which distro. So I'm assuming that's best to go to the nightlight guys, and I don't know who makes it.
It's GNOME. Yeah, it's a GNOME settings daemon plugin.
It's a color plugin.
It's using the same thing as color profiles. Yeah.
Hmm.
So are you on NVIDIA or on Intel?
Yeah, NVIDIA. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and it might be some weird interaction with the NVIDIA driver. I don't know, but I
have a one potentially 2-word answer for you, and it's Xorg.
Yeah, that's fair too.
What about Xorg? Sorry, you lost me there.
From what I've seen I think I've seen this in a GNOME chat, is that when it's applying the color profiles, it's actually only selecting 2 monitors, and the other one is completely unaffected. So it's just the color profile layer.
And that's the GNOME color plugin for when running under Xorg specifically.
Yeah.
Which Elementary OS uses Xorg. Okay.
Cool.
All right, so we have, like I had said, questions that were brought up by members of the community in Telegram and some from the last show. So if you guys don't mind answering a few, we'd love to send them your way.
Yeah, we'd love to answer some questions.
All right, so with the recent thing with Zorin OS, with them asking for information, from their users or not asking for information, them grabbing information without asking. How do you guys get the information you need for the amount of users you have?
I wrote a blog post about this.
Okay.
So I can kind of answer a very summarized version. I'm not going to read you a blog post, but so we heavily rely on, I guess, honestly, things like this, like today, talking directly to users a lot on social media and in person at conferences, and just getting feedback directly from users. And we also rely on the expertise of professional designers and developers that make up our community of people building elementary OS. We don't feel that we need to get analytics in order to make good design decisions. We can test designs, we can iterate on designs and test those results in a more controlled environment, but we don't need to be constantly pulling analytics from our users in order to make a good product. And I think the fact that a lot of people like our product is kind of proof of that.
Yep.
Cool. Nice.
I don't know if Dan had anything to add specifically too, if I missed anything.
No, you pretty much said it. Like we just don't do that.
Very nice.
Excellent. So the next one has sort of already been asked, but we'll ask it officially. Do you feel that there will be a dark mode standard in the future for EOS? And if so, how far off is that milestone?
The how far off is hard. Yes, we are working directly towards a future of a dark style preference. I've done a lot of research and development towards that, and we're working within Free Desktop and GNOME, and I believe KDE we've been in contact with. I'm not sure exactly the status on that, but on standardizing it across desktops, because we obviously we heavily encourage people to use curated apps and live within the elementary bubble. We also know that's not, like, the web exists, and there's like other Electron apps and things that people do use, and it would be a much better experience if it was actually a free desktop standard. So that's what we're working towards.
Yeah, I think that's something that maybe people don't necessarily know, is that even though we're really focused on our ecosystem, like we've submitted patches to Firefox and to Electron and other things like that, because we do want that experience to be good for everybody. And where we can, we're going to reach outside and try to maybe push the other guys a little bit in our direction.
We had a question from Dustin, and he wanted us to ask you if you're going to come eat barbecue with him again at Linux Fest Northwest.
I would love to eat barbecue again at Linux Fest Northwest. I really enjoyed Linux Fest Northwest. That was my first one last year. So I definitely want to make an effort to get there again. I think it's a really cool crowd, and I'd like to participate more. I've talked to Cass about maybe we can try to put together a workshop or something. Not making any promises, but I like the crowd and I want to get more involved.
Very nice. So JJ has a question of, what is your intended audience for Elementary OS? Who are you targeting?
It's always a hard question, because like the easy answer is everybody, but that's a terrible answer, right? So I mean, you look at our website and it's pretty specific with a broad category of, it's an alternative for Windows and Mac OS. So I think that kind of tells you, like, we're not interested in taking away market share from other Linux-based operating systems. Like, our end game is not like all Linux users are going to be elementary OS users and there's going to be no Ubuntu's and no Arches and no whatever. Like, no, like, that's dumb. We're much more interested in people who maybe have never used a Linux-based operating system before and are looking for an alternative to Windows, or looking for an alternative to Mac OS that runs better on their machine or respects their privacy better. And so again, that's still a really broad group, but I think that helps inform a lot of our decisions.
Yeah, and part of that too is that we are really focused on like that desktop, laptop, like consumer space. So we're not developing a server operating system or an Internet of Things operating system or an embedded operating system, or we're not making like garage door opener Linux. Like, we're really focused on making a desktop slash notebook kind of experience for kind of consumers and producers.
Cool. So there's already been some discussion around the warning you see when installing non-curated apps. Some people view this as a bad thing. What is the idea behind this, and what is the goal for this warning?
So we actually started thinking about adding that from direct feedback from users because we kept hearing from people that they were installing these non-curated apps, and they come with caveats like Ubuntu doesn't really carry updates for every single app in there. And people were like, how come when I install LibreOffice, it's the super old version? So it was like, okay, well, we need to be a little bit more aggressive about letting people know that if you install this application, like, you might not get the latest version. You're going to get whatever version comes, from the whoever published it at that time in Ubuntu. So it's kind of like a response to answering user questions was the intent.
And then it's also looking forward for a future of Flatpak apps. We know we need a way to also communicate like permissions for Flatpaks and implications of those permissions. So this is a way to basically get that information there in front of a user to say, hey, here you're installing this thing that might not be the best for you or your privacy, like, and here's some information about why.
Eric,
Rocco, is it you?
Did you want me to read the
no, you
Miko?
can go and ask, and I'll read that before we get into them other questions.
Gotcha. Okay. So this sort of leads into the last question of the target audience. And I know you guys do a lot around, design and testing and, being very sort of methodical and thoughtful. You sort of answered it to some degree, but I'm curious, when you're doing your design work or you're looking at user feedback and testing, if your market is really, Windows and Mac users, so just I'm backpedaling just a little bit. We had an experiment a month or two ago where one of our community members took their roommate who had never used Linux and just stuck them in front of Ubuntu and said, okay, what do you want to do? And then try to sort of watched her work her way through it. I'm assuming you've done things like that with Pantheon and with Elementary. Um, you don't have to be long-winded or go into great detail, but when you're saying you're focused on those users, I'm assuming you look at what do those users expect whenever they use a system? How can we make that the best experience? Do you have any thoughts on like how that process works, or if you understand what I mean?
Yeah, so there's always a balance between, I guess, what users think they want and what users are trying to do, if that makes sense. A lot of users will say, well, if I want to use an alternative to Windows, it needs to look like Windows. And like, there's value in that line of thought. Like they are afraid of something or they're uncomfortable with something that's less familiar to them. But that doesn't mean the solution is to make it look exactly like Windows. The solution might be to make the design of the operating system itself more cohesive and more intuitive. So I think there's a lot of that, of like, yes, we listen to feedback from people coming from Windows and Mac OS and what they expect, but it's not always a direct, oh, they want it to have a dock on the bottom that looks like the Windows taskbar, so we're just going to add that as a feature. It's a lot more nuanced than that. So I think, I don't know if that answers that question specifically.
It does. I mean, so when I think of, I did software development, particularly product management for a number of years, and it was always difficult to get the right feedback from users. They'll give you anecdotal information, but it's very difficult to get like, okay, let's specifically talk about why this works or doesn't. So do you have, and I think one of the other accusations or critiques I've seen of open source development is that it sort of just happens somewhere off in the distance, and it's a guy or somebody doing something that's very disconnected. And I get the sense that you guys are much more sort of team oriented and you're focused on specific goals. Do you have sort of sessions where you actually watch people use it, or is that like too nuts and bolts?
We've experimented with that in the past. I guess we don't do like really overarching user testing sessions of the entire operating system, because like an operating system is a massive thing. There's so much you can do with it. But I think every time we're working on either a new feature or iterating on a feature, we make sure to like get people in front of the screen that either aren't daily users of the operating system, so they're not kind of biased about how things should work, or people like I pull my wife in for this all the time. I'm like, hey, what do you look at the screen? What do you think? So it's not this like big formal process, but I do know we're always interested in getting that feedback. Actually, social media has been awesome for that in the past probably year or so. I feel like we've done a lot more of that, of like, hey, I worked on this today. It's not shipping, it's not done, but what do you think? And people love to give feedback. People love to give unsolicited feedback, but they especially love to give solicited feedback. So they're like, ooh, you guys are listening to me. Like, I'm going to tell you what's on my mind. But it's always important to deduce the why behind what they're telling you. So they'll tell you something very specific, but you have to, it's still the job of a designer to understand why they think that, or why they want what they want, and how that fits into the product itself.
And I think the reason that I ask these questions, and I'm not trying to belabor the point, is that when someone like me has a response that I do, I'm smart enough to realize that you guys aren't just deciding things arbitrarily. Like, you're doing things for a reason. And it's a challenge to me personally, and I want to know, well, why were those decisions made? And I think that's what I'm kind of getting at. And I know this is not the right forum for that, but you've obviously done that work and have picked that direction, and I will continue to watch what you do, regardless of whether or not I use it on a regular basis. So
yeah, and I think honestly, like, this is a good forum for that answer. Like, this type of community engagement and involvement is I think something that's kind of unique in the Linux world or the open source world, where we are able to sit down, whether around a physical table or a virtual table, and just chat with the people who make products and like ask them about why they do what they do. And I think that's a cool part of what we do.
Dan, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say that, one thing that's really interesting, like Cass brought up about social media, is it gives us a chance to do some kind of reflective listening, where we can present something and say, hey, this is some copy and I would like you to read it and then tell me what it says. And so we've kind of done that like a few times with things, and it's interesting to see the way that people respond to those kinds of things, because there are so many times when you're using an interface and it's trying to communicate something to you, and it's trying to present something maybe educational, and if it's not worded in like just the right way, you can communicate the total wrong thing. So that's something that we really try to iterate through a ton, is making sure that the messaging says what it's intended to say. And sometimes we don't get it right and we have to come back and do it over again, but I think that's something we put a lot of effort into, is trying to really get feedback from people about how they feel about something, and if they understood it, and then okay, nitpick at this little thing and that little thing, and figure out how do we make it so that our interfaces communicate that their intent properly.
Well, it's a bit of a running joke with Rocco, but he's the guy that always spots the single pixel that's off. So when he says something's beautiful, he's looked at it.
Yeah, I usually look at it with a microscope, but I'm going to read this message from one of our Telegram users, but I do want to ask, how many people do you have on the elementary team?
So it's a fun one to define. There's a handful of employees. There's a couple full-time employees and a couple contractors. And then we have, I think in our Slack, there's like 100 and some people right now. But of course, not all of those people are like active every day, all day, every day. Dan, you probably have a better like numbers sense than I do.
Yeah, it's really difficult to define. Like Cass said, we have a couple people on payroll full time, and then we do a couple of contracts, and then we have one thing where it's not really a contract, like it's a private, like, small business that we like use their services, I guess, and like so that it's kind of like, okay, like I don't know, but I would say that like regular active contributors right now, that it's probably in like the 20s or 30s, I would say, of like people who are doing stuff every week.
All right.
We could probably like run some analytics against GitHub or something and get better number. Of course, not all the work
Yeah.
happens on GitHub. Like there's a lot of like translations and design work that doesn't happen on GitHub itself, but that'd give us a pretty good idea.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Is the translations community is actually gigantic, and they're in some ways kind of a separate community, but they are huge and like super important.
Yep.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, actually, this dovetails into that because this message, I just wanted to read a couple lines of it. He says, I was a distro hopper for about 10 years. In 2007, I installed my first Linux distro, only to find other distributions. Changed many times over the next couple years. Changed distros every month or two. Been using Ubuntu for the longest time, about 3 years with short breaks. I fell in love with Linux at first sight, but until now, there was no distro with such a clear, elegant, beautiful, and consistent vision as Elementary OS. This is the only distribution I am currently using, and this is unlikely to change. For the first time, I actively got involved in the creation of distros. I started translating curated apps into Polish. I'm thinking about learning Vala to create some small apps. And since I'm an Elementary OS user, my questions will probably be very practical. And he goes on to answer some questions, but I thought that was pretty awesome.
That is awesome, and that's really exciting that translations was a way that they felt they could get involved, because I think that's something that can be a struggle sometimes to convey to people, is that like part of being involved in the community doesn't just mean that you have to be a developer. Like there's tons of different ways to get involved, and it's really appreciated for all the non-developer contributors. They do super important work, and we wouldn't have nearly as good of a product without non-developing contributors.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's also cool. Like our third-party app ecosystem has kind of created a developer, and again, not developer specific, but like a content creation ecosystem around it. Like there's people who are going and like contributing icons to third-party apps and contributing translations to third-party apps, and like those apps are like sharing code between one another, and like it's really cool to see that kind of grow organically into its own like robust ecosystem that we're not like, it's not something we're directly like, you know, controlling every piece of. Like it's this organically growing group of people that are making apps for users of Elementary OS, and that's awesome.
Spinning off from this, I've just got one question on the translation front, because I think you'd agree that if you asked everybody in this room to write a piece about a particular application, they would use 15 different sets of words. Who decides which translation is correct? Especially when you've got like two Polish people, let's say, arguing with each other over, no, that terminology is the best way to do it, or that terminology. Is there, I mean, how does that sort of thing get decided?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit outside of our wheelhouse. There's better people to ask and know more about how that works. But from my understanding, the different translation communities have guidelines, and like I know, for example, for like the Spanish community, that they have a decision about, okay, like do we use like formal or informal when we refer to the user, and so that's something that the community kind of decides on a style guide for. And I believe that several of them use the same style guides from Ubuntu.
Right, gotcha. Cool. Thank you.
Well, one of the questions that Michael had for you guys was, do you plan to add new features to the greeter? And can we expect its integration with notifications, events, and events from the calendar or the media players?
Yeah, I think right now with the greeter, what's hard is LightDM, the greeter, like, I'm not actually sure the correct technical term, but the greeter is running as a separate user in a separate session than the user's session. So it doesn't actually have access to your notifications or the music that you're playing or any of your data. Like the greeter, like we export the wallpapers and avatar specifically, but everything else, like the greeter session doesn't have access to, which I think is important for security and privacy, that you can't get past that greeter. You're not logged in as the same user. But that means that features like getting notifications on the lock screen is a lot more difficult. When I was at a UX Hackfest with some GNOME Shell people, They were talking about the similar decisions they made early on with the gnome shell greeter and why the gnome shell lock screen actually does run in session, and it was for notifications. So I'm not sure what the correct answer, I guess, there is. I know it's something we've talked about and are thinking about, but I'm not sure the right way forward to manage both security, privacy, and then integration with those things.
Yeah, I think that's something where there's an ongoing discussion about maybe having like a different mode for the greeter or something that runs when it's a lock screen versus a
Mm-hmm.
like a login screen, and that doing that you could have like an in session lock screen where you could do things like allow music to still play and show notifications and be a little bit more integrated with the user's session. But yeah, there's a lot of weird kind of technical stuff that makes it a little bit harder than it would seem.
Hmm. All right. So now's a question with regard to people paying for applications and people paying for the download of the ISO to contribute back to Elementary. Have you found that that has increased over time, and is it a gradual thing, or does it go in sort of like peaks and troughs?
Yeah, so this is actually pretty interesting. I've been kind of looking at some of the analytics on that recently, and something that's particularly interesting to me is I found that when we first started doing pay what you want, that the average price that people who did paid the download was around like $5 or something, and over the last year, the average is now around $8. So it's kind of interesting to see that over time, I think people are showing that they're seeing more value in what we're producing, like as we're adding more features and refining things. So I think that's a really positive indication. But we're also seeing like the overall like gross revenue and download numbers go up per release. So I think we're having more reach as well. So I think both in terms of reach and in terms of perceived value that we're on a upward path.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as seeing like peaks and valleys, yeah, definitely like you see huge peaks at release time, and then like in between releases, you see valleys. But I think that what I've seen for the most part is after a release that our valleys are usually on average higher than the valleys from the last release. So I think
Hmm.
it's like still overall growth.
Yeah. So just excuse me while I do a spin-off question from this. Being the market leaders in this type of innovation, yeah, um, how can we, the community, get that message across to everybody as a whole that, just because it's Linux, it's not free. People put hard effort into doing this. So are you sort of trying to champion that as well, or are you just concentrating on Elementary?
We're definitely championing that. Yeah, I mean that's a big reason we're at the Linux App Summit and Guadec and those types of events where we're talking with other people making other platforms, and we're sharing our experience over the last several years of building this ecosystem of like, here's what worked for us, here's what we found actually didn't work. Like, don't do this, or like we wouldn't recommend you try that. Like, and I think people are seeing that, and like Flatpak is now going to have support for payments built into the format. Like, that's really cool, and that I think a pretty direct result of people seeing what Elementary is doing, and us kind of sharing our insight there.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I think another kind of interesting piece to that is like Endless has expressed interest in doing like a pay what you want system. So I think people are starting to see that pay what you want is a good like middle ground between like outright like denying people access to things if they don't have the means, and like not being able to fundraise at all. So I'm excited that people are starting to see like, oh, pay what you want like seems really actually viable, and is a pretty, like all things considered, ethical path to monetization. Um, but I know when we've talked to other people that they've faced some issues with, for example, we use Stripe as our payment processor, and they do not necessarily support doing payments from every single country because they're a US based company that they have to obey like sanctions and things like that. And so there's some questions for like an international organization like GNOME, and is it like in the charter that maybe it's unfair, or maybe it's not equitable for them to use like a US based payment processor. And there's been questions thrown around there about like the starting point is how do we even process payments on a legal level. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a difficult hurdle, even if you decide you want to do it.
I think another piece too, as I meant to say earlier, is um, we're really careful to try to reframe the conversation around paying for apps. It's pay what you want, but you're paying for an app, and you can choose to pay zero. And it's not a donation. I think that's there's legal expectations around what you call a donation, depending on your jurisdiction and stuff. Like it can be expected that it's tax deductible, and so we try to avoid that, and we also try to avoid. I mean, the idea of donating for something versus buying something is very different, and we've seen a lot of success with reframing it as you're purchasing this app. Just like you purchase an app on your phone or whatever, like you're purchasing an app, but you actually have more freedom in that you can choose how much is of value to you.
Yep.
I do really think that that is one of the most admirable things that you guys have done, is to give developers a way to express the fact that they are putting something out there that they care about, and that it's okay to pay. I mean, it's almost frustrating in some cases for someone like me who's willing to pay for apps, where there's a developer and you go to their GitHub page, or you go to whatever website they have, and you say, well, how do I donate? Like, how can I give back to you for doing all this work? And if you're lucky, they kind of put any thought into it. So the fact that you guys are giving people a chance to do that, and then do it in a sort of a centralized way. And also, I've said this so many times on different streams and things, but I'm a web guy, and I heard one of you talk about that change you made to the website, where it used to be like download or donate, and then you set it so that you have to think about, like, what do I value this at? Like, what is this worth to me? And just that simple change made a huge difference, because all of a sudden, when people are pause and think about it, oh yeah, well, I'll give you a couple bucks, or I'll give you $10 or whatever. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to do things, and it's okay to make money. You're putting real effort into this. It's not free software, in the sense that no one ever put anything behind this. So I do genuinely respect you guys for doing that, and I hope, like you said, Flatpak, and I hope we see that just sort of cascade now out into the larger community. So I had a question here from Mitchell Valentino. Does Elementary OS work closely with any other distros or software developers? And I'm going to assume, because you're downstream from Ubuntu and GNOME and other projects, that's certainly the case. But do you have like a sort of a set, I've seen you were at the KDE and GNOME Summit, representing Elementary. So I know you're out there, but is that sort of a formal thing you guys do?
I think it's an informal thing we do. I don't know how formal it is, but yeah, we make a huge effort to work, especially with the GNOME folks. A lot of the technology stack under the hood that we use is GNOME components. So we're not a downstream of GNOME Shell, and we're not downstream of the GNOME ecosystem, I guess, but a lot of the components we use are from that world. So we're definitely we give a lot of feedback to them. Again, we share a lot of our experiences building a different product than they build, and that diversity of people using tools, I think, creates a better set of tools. Because we might have ideas that are very different from what GNOME thinks, but we're sharing a lot of the same technology, so maybe that technology can actually become better because it supports both of our different workflows. There's also downstreams from us actually too, and we work with them as much as we can as well. So Pop! OS uses a fork of App Center for their software store, and they use the front end for their installer is a fork of our installer that we designed and developed. So it's downstreamed, and I guess Xubuntu, I think, and XFCE. I think there's a couple others I'm probably forgetting, but we try to be as open as we can about working with people because I think it does make for better tools, both tools that we use and making our products better for other people to use as well.
Yeah, I think that's something that we've been enabled to do more as we're growing is having the developer expertise in our community and developing connections with the right people inside our upstreams to be able to contribute in that process a bit more. And like for me, especially, Alan Pope has been super helpful because if I ever think about like, oh, there's this issue that could maybe affect Ubuntu, I can ask him to point me in the right direction and he'll let me know, okay, yeah, ping this guy, he works on that. And then I can ask him about, hey, is this something that affects Ubuntu too? And can we fix it up there? And then definitely trying to do as much work in upstream code bases and repositories as possible, I think is beneficial to everyone.
Hey,
So I had a question.
Go ahead, Eris.
Okay. So do you consider Elementary a Linux distro, or do you consider Elementary something else? Is Linux just a means to make Elementary OS, or what would you say to that?
That's an interesting question because it depends on what you mean by distro.
Yeah.
And if you define a distribution in kind of this sense of like, this is something that takes a bunch of open source software and packages it up and distributes it, then I think we're not really so much a distro because our goal isn't to package other people's software for them. But if you mean it in like the casual sense of like, it's on DistroWatch or like it comes in an ISO file, then yeah. It's like it kind of depends on what you mean by distro, I guess.
Yeah, and I think to answer the other part about is Linux, I guess Linux is basically an implementation detail as far as our users or the majority of our users I think are concerned. I think theoretically Elementary OS could have a different kernel if it existed and was awesome as Linux, but it doesn't and it's not. So yeah, I don't know. We love all the work that's gone into Linux and it's incredible and it's the best base for our platform, but I don't know that there's anything specifically about Linux that ties Elementary to it, specifically.
Yeah, I guess if there were to come out like a competitor to Linux that was like somehow more modern or more desktop focused or something, like, look at all the stuff that's happened with like X and System D and like, these kind of things where it was a staple of like what defines a distro that like everyone uses Xorg because that's just what it is. And then like now people are really taking more of a serious look at Wayland, and there's been a lot of development into moving away from X. If something like that happened in the Linux space where it was like, well, there's this new kernel and it's just as open source and awesome as Linux is, but it's like totally just focused on desktops and notebooks and doesn't try to do any of the server stuff, then that might be something that we'd be like, okay, I don't know, like maybe this is interesting. But there's definitely no like effort put into that at the moment.
Yeah, it's like all theoretical.
So is it okay? I know this is a little bit late, but is it okay if I share my experience with Elementary? I had to go early because I was going out for dinner.
Make it really quick, Pizza.
Okay. I'll just I had bullet points. I was going to go into more depth. I really like the approach to Flatpaks. I think every distro should do that because I don't like having like 3 different types of package managers in my software centers at once, that being native, Flatpaks, and snaps. I also like the Pantheon desktop. I like its workflow, and I love the App Center. But like Eric, I need a system tray for Discord and Telegram and Steam. I know you can use Control Q on Discord and Telegram, but for Steam, I have to go in the system monitor to close it. And yeah, it's a good distro for like your mom, for her to do her taxes in web browsing. But I don't think Biddle is the right test group because we're all technical users and we all like customizing things. I feel like Elementary is more of a replacement for Mac OS and Windows than it is for something you would actually want to customize. People always complain about how Elementary isn't customizable, but then you don't hear anyone complaining about Mac OS and Windows not being customizable, even though those are just as uncustomizable. And yeah.
All right.
All right. Cool. Thank you very much indeed. So on that theme of, you guys have a very distinct way that you want elementary to go, and it looks truly awesome. Would you ever consider doing hardware as well? Have you thought of, if a hardware manufacturer came to you and said, look, we've got this laptop, we want to market it with elementary OS, would you consider that, or are you just purely software guys?
I want to do hardware so bad.
Yeah.
So bad.
But hardware is hard, and that's not a pun that came out like a pun. But
Yeah.
hardware is difficult, and the margins are so low for most of it. And you know, I have a little firsthand experience with this previously working at System 76, and they do awesome work. And you know, it's funny. I think Dan, you're gonna probably shame me for this. I don't know who the quote is from, but it's people who want to be serious about their software have to make the hardware or whatever. That's a terrible butchering of the quote, I'm sure.
I'm always serious.
Oh my. I'm there's a Alexa just went off here or something, and this is not my normal place I'm traveling, so I don't know who is listening to this conversation from the other side.
We're being listened to.
I guess so. But anyway, so it's funny seeing, I think, a traditionally hardware company, System 76, moving into software with Pop OS. You know, we've always been doing software with elementary OS, and I think hardware is awesome. There's so much more thought you can put into the experience when you're actually controlling the physical device that the software is running on. That said, you know, if an OEM comes to us and says, hey, we'd like to market this as an elementary computer, I mean, that's happened a few times with a few smaller OEMs. The problem is always ensuring that experience is going to faithfully be representative of what we would want the ideal hardware to be. And that hasn't really happened to this point. So I guess there's no precise plans for that. It's always an area that we're interested in and thinking about, but hardware is really difficult.
So Daniel, you obviously sounded like you had a real passion. You want to do it. So go on, tell us your thoughts.
I mean, it's something that we've talked about for so long and looked into for years. But I think that something to consider is that System 76 has been around for 10 years, and just now is able to build their own computers.
They got freaking lasers, man.
Right?
They do, yeah.
That's how expensive and hard it is to do hardware. It takes you to amass the amount of experience and the amount of capital and the technical expertise to make your own hardware. It's extremely difficult.
So what would you think of do you think elementary would be good on a phone? Because I've been saying for quite a while, I cover Librem 5 a lot on my channel, or I've been doing it lately, and I've been saying that elementary would be a really good phone experience because it has a lot of design standards and stuff that iOS and Android have in terms of design standards. And plus there's already an ecosystem for elementary OS. I feel like having elementary OS as a desktop operating system with elementary on a mobile operating system on a phone, that would be a really cool experience. So
yeah, I'm curious to see what the kind of final actual achieved product, I guess, of Librem and GNOME on a phone is going to be like. Because I think PinePhone, and I think that will inform our thinking, I guess, around mobile. There's no plans today at all whatsoever for elementary OS on a mobile device. Elementary OS today would be terrible on a mobile device because it's designed for laptops and desktops.
Yeah.
But I think, it's kind of seeing what GNOME is doing in that area and what Purism and Librem and PinePhone and everything are doing in that area might help inform us. It's also, I guess there's also the area of integrating with existing hardware and existing services that you might be using on your devices already is also an interesting way you can approach that. And that's a way you see actually other companies approaching it too, of making sure your desktop operating system integrates really well with whatever phone operating system you happen to be using. So there's kind of that route that we could take as well. Yeah, mobile's. We said hardware is hard. I think mobile's even harder because it's so oversaturated right now with long-time industry players that are struggling to even make a dent. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, something that I've been thinking about more is that if you want to do a companion platform, that mobile might not be the best first choice to go to, that
Yeah.
it might be more interesting to do like a home or television device because, like desktop, the hardware is a little bit more accessible and democratized. Like people have access to things like the Pi, and it's starting to get to a point where like video playback on the Pi is something that doesn't suck. So, that might be more of an interesting direction to do like a companion platform is in that kind of form factor. But I definitely feel like that there are people that are pioneering in the mobile space right now, and we don't have the kind of ability to do the kind of pioneer that they're doing. And maybe once it's a little bit more democratized and a little bit more evolved, then we'll be able to jump in and see what we have to say about doing a mobile device.
All right. We are running out of time, and we are taking up your guys' time. I do want to finish with two people. Bill, do you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing when you guys went back to the warning for adding software. I just want to read something. This is coming from Ubuntu. Adding proprietary driver gives me this warning. A proprietary driver has private code the Ubuntu developers can't review or improve. Security and other updates are dependent on that driver vendor. And no one's yelling at them, but you guys got yelled at for basically saying the same thing. And I think it's a really big overreaction. So I just wanted to point out that that kind of a warning is out there today and has been around for a long time.
Yep, agreed. And I noticed that the warning itself has different information depending on what software you're installing. So like when I installed Spotify, it told me exactly how big the package was. Doesn't do that for every package, but I don't have a problem with the warning. And we're gonna end this with Chicken because he is the elementary super fan, and I think you guys might need to hire him on the marketing team. Just saying. So Chicken, you're the last guy. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to go ahead and say that the sort of rolling nature of features on top of Elementary OS has been really great to see from people who've installed from Juno up now until Hera. And if you just look at the difference between what Juno was and what Hera is now, even super tiny parts of the operating system, like the color tagging in files, has been refined in a way that it's so sharp and crisp and clean. And every single small incremental change throughout the entire port or the entire aspect of the operating system creates this overall beauty, I guess I would say. And so the fact that you guys don't just kind of leave it and just eventually wait to actually implement it, it's rolled out, everybody's getting what they need to get as it's being developed and released. I feel like this model is really great for users because it doesn't hold anyone back. So I really do appreciate that. And it's great to see the contrast between what it was just a year ago and what it is now.
Yeah, I'm really glad that that's something that you connected with. I think that's something that we've talked a lot about is tightening the feedback loop between the users and what we're putting out. And I'm really proud of the fact that there's been a couple of instances already where people have reported an issue or made a feature request, and it's like we have the ability now to push out an update that fixes that thing like in a very short amount of time. And I really want to get closer to that ideal where we're having that conversation directly with people and they really feel like they're participating, because I think that's something that you can't get from the big proprietary operating systems, is that feeling of participation.
Yep, absolutely. All right, that is going to be it for this show. Dan, Cassidy, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks. It's been a good time.
Well, you're welcome to join us any week, but you may have other plans. But I do want to thank you both for all of the hard work that you guys and your whole team put into giving us stuff we can mess around with, stuff we can play with, operating systems that are just awesome in Linux in general. But in your team specifically, I want to thank you guys for concentrating on something that means a lot to me, and that is the design of it. I am a guy that loves to see beautiful design, and I care about that. People make fun of me, but I do care about that 1 pixel that's off. And you guys have that attention to detail, and that is just amazing, and I love it.
Thanks.
All right, that's going to do it for us, but everybody gets a last word in. So, Chris?
Bill, and sorry, my screen just flipped on me. I can't see the other. Thank you guys for coming on and listening to us and presenting your philosophy. Cassie, there we go. That's what I was trying to think of. And Rocco, as always, it's been a pleasure. And just waiting for next week. Or are we going to take a week off?
We are not.
Okay.
All right, Derek, last word.
Thank you for having me, and just want to say thank you for coming, Cassidy and Dan. Love Elementary and looking forward to using it for a long term.
Eris, last word.
Thank you very much for the stream, and thank you, Daniel and Cassidy, for coming on, having a very strong vision for their OS.
Yep. Tony?
And the distro for next week is?
We haven't decided that yet, Tony. I still have 5 minutes yet. Go ahead.
How do I get to install it before the end of the show?
You
with
can't.
Only a couple
I
of
am
minutes
doing this
notice?
just for you, Tony. You cannot get a head start on us.
It's a torture test for you.
Okay, I'll accept that, and I'll shut up now because it's running late.
All right, Dan Kelly, last word.
Thanks for Dan and Cassidy for showing up and listening to us tell them about our experiences with Elementary. I may continue to use it for a while. It's kind of growing on me, even though I'm not used to that type of a workflow. But again, thanks for the show, Rocco and Zeb, and that's all I have to say.
Chicken.
Oh, that's me.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who participated. All of the feedback that was presented was super nice to see. Perspective is something that is really hard to get on your own. So this was enlightening for me. I'm sure it was enlightening for Daniel and Cassidy as well. Also, I appreciate you two coming onto the stream and bearing the burden of us.
Tyler, last word.
There we go. Thanks for the show. Again, really enjoy the doubleheader on the second Tuesday of every month. Daniel and Cassidy, thank you for coming. And Dan, really enjoy you being on User Error. Fantastic podcast.
Thanks.
Yep. Agreed. Vince, last word.
I just love being here so much. It's such a great forum to be able to interact with developers. Thank you, Rocco, and thank you, Zeb, and Eric, and all your helpers. Thank you so much.
Nate, or is it obstinate tonight?
No. It's just Nate.
Okay.
So, Elementary, keep on being stubborn. I appreciate that, but I still heart my system tray. So, I will see you around.
Dave, last word.
To everyone who has made tonight possible and special, thank you all very much.
Cheese.
Yeah, thanks to all the Biddle folk, Rocco, Zeb, Eric, for wrangling the cats that is Biddle from time to time, and big thanks to Cassidy and Daniel for showing up. I think it's great that you guys are here to get honest feedback. It definitely isn't sugar coated, so I think it's a great forum for this, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight.
All right, Daniel, you have a last word.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody for all of your feedback, and that there's definitely some things that I think we need to take a second look at and have some discussions about, and I really appreciate getting the chance to be here with you guys.
Eric.
All right, Rocco, I hate to do this, but folks, you don't realize that Rocco is like a real prima donna. Like, he's so hard to deal with. I mean, you see this like smooth, warm personality, and you don't. No, I'm kidding. I'm completely kidding. Rocco's fantastic. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. I love this community. I love seeing all your faces every week. I love that we get to talk to Daniel and Cassidy and actually have this kind of feedback with something we love on a level that is pretty much impossible with anything else I've ever done or used in my life. It's fantastic, and I hope everybody has a great week, and see you next time.
Alan, last word.
Well, thank you, Rocco, for having me, and thank you for Dan and Cassie. Hope I wasn't too hard on you and your operating system, but I will keep a good eye on your product, on your project here, and I expect great things from it. Everyone, have a great night.
All right, Cassidy, you got a last word?
Yeah, I guess thanks for having us on. This was awesome, and I'm going to be that guy who plugs something. But
do it.
Go to elementary.io/get-involved if you like to help make Elementary OS or like to help make free software into a better product.
Nice. Wendy, are you there?
I'm here.
Last word, Wendy.
Hello. It was just good to see you all.
All right. JJ, last word.
Thanks very much, Rocco and friends, for the stream, and also thanks to Dan and Cassidy for being here on the stream. I do get to listen to you guys on occasion as off and on guests of Jupiter Broadcasting, so it's a pleasure to actually see your faces here. And hope you guys have a good weekend, and we have a week till Christmas.
Yep.
Or 2 weeks.
All right, Bill, last word.
Thank you, Dan and Cassidy, for being here. Dan, thank you so much for letting me know that ghosts are the apex predators. It's very important. And Cassidy said something about the Get Involved page. I just want to say, working on a project, that is the best Get Involved in a community, in an operating system, in a distro page I've ever seen. It has all the information you need if you really want to get involved. Well done. And thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Rocco.
All right, Pizza, last word.
Thank you for having the stream. I have a lot of fun going on it. And yeah.
Okay. PZ, last word.
Well, sorry I dropped off there. So I think for the first time in a long, long time, my modem just decided to go boing. But what I found really interesting during this whole conversation this evening, and it's something I think that Daniel and Cassidy can take away with them, the only complaints that people had was about the UI and the way it looked. Nobody said this distro doesn't work, this didn't work, and that didn't work, and that wasn't working. So it's a testimony to you guys that you've got this absolutely fantastic base that works. Okay, Eric, it might not work the way some people like it, but it is literally a 5-minute fix, as Dave said, to add a couple of bits of software, add your PPAs, add your icon back. This thing just rocks. And as Nathan said, don't change your minds. Keep on this ethos that you've got of your design UI, because I think I can honestly say that you are the only distro that I've ever heard of that says, okay, yeah, you can build an application for our app store, but you must follow this ethos. It must work like this. It must have that sort of, so that it all just works perfectly. Keep it up. It's really, really good.
All right, that is going to wrap it up for us. Thank you again, Dan and Cassidy, for being here. The distro for next week, I don't know. What do we have left for Ubuntu's Studio and
Kylan?
Okay, so I guess we'll run with Studio. Does anybody have a problem with that?
Sounds good to me.
All right, so Ubuntu Studio 1910 will be the distro challenge for this coming week. And Dan and Cassidy, there is a small show, and it's not well known, but there's a small show called Linux Spotlight that I'd love to have both of you guys on individually at some time. So that would
That'd
be
be
awesome.
awesome.
Yeah. Let us know the details.
All right. This week's Linux Spotlight was Ryan Sipes from Thunderbird, and that was a great conversation. Ryan is an awesome dude just to sit down and talk with. This coming Wednesday at 6 a.m., we will continue trying to bridge the gap between communities, and Chris Fisher from Jupiter Broadcasting will be the next Linux Spotlight episode. It was fantastic. I loved it, and I think you guys are going to love it too. So
awesome.
I think
Hooking
that's it.
us up.
Is that all the announcements we have? Is that everything, housekeeping wise?
I think it is, yep. And I've just put a link to the Elementary Get Involved page in YouTube for everybody.
All right, that's going to do it for us. We will see you next week. But remember, long live Linux.
Later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
See yous.
Goodbye, everyone.